So something big is happening in the UK when it comes to the world of work. There's a huge new piece of legislation on the table called the Employment Rights Bill. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what it could mean for millions of people.
The government itself is calling this the biggest upgrade in employment rights for a generation. I mean, that's a pretty bold claim, right? So let's get past the headline and really dig into the details to see what's actually changing.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with job security and what this means for fair pay. Then we'll look at the push for a better work-life balance. After that, we'll get into how these new rights are supposed to be enforced. And finally, we'll talk about the bottom line. What's it all going to cost, and when is it happening? All right, first up, more security at work. A huge chunk of this bill is really aimed at tackling job insecurity and what the government is calling unfair practices. And it has a laser focus on one particular kind of contract. And that would be the 0 hours contract. You know, the core problem here has always been unpredictability. For so many workers, it just means you have no idea what your hours are going to be or what your income will look like because the employer doesn't have to offer you any work. So what's the fix? Well, the bill comes at this with a kind of three-step plan. Workers on these contracts will get a new right to guaranteed hours, a right to reasonable notice before a shift, and, this is a big one, the right to actually get paid if that shift is canceled at the last minute. It's all about bringing some stability to this type of work. Now, this next change is a really, really big deal. Up until now, you had to be with an employer for 2 whole years before you were protected from being unfairly dismissed. This bill just gets rid of that waiting period completely. It becomes a right you have from day one. Now, to balance this out for businesses, there will be a new official probation period to make sure a new hire is a good fit. And the bill doesn't stop there. It's also taking aim at that controversial fire and rehire tactic. It's beefing up the rules around redundancy, and it's closing a specific loophole for maritime workers. So all in all, it's a major push for job protection across the board. Okay, so once you have more security in your job, what about the pay itself? Well, that brings us right to our second section, fair pay for fair work. This is all about making sure people's pay packets are protected and actually reflect the work they're doing. So how does it do that? Well, first, it makes statutory sick pay stronger by getting rid of waiting periods and the minimum earning rules. It's also bringing in something called fair pay agreements, specifically for the social care sector. Oh, and it's finally tackling the issue of tips, making it so employers have to talk to their staff about how tips are shared out. Our third theme is one I think a lot of us can relate to: improving work-life balance. This whole part of the bill is about creating new rights and strengthening old ones to help employees who have family commitments or just need a bit more flexibility. A really crucial change here is making key things like paternity leave a day one right. The bill also creates a brand new right to unpaid bereavement leave for everyone. And to give new parents more protection, new mothers will get extra protection from dismissal for 6 months after they come back to work. The bill also puts more teeth into the existing right to ask for flexible working. Now, it's still a right to request, not a right to have, but the pressure is really shifting onto the employer. They're now going to have to clearly explain why a request is denied, and that reason has to be considered reasonable. Okay, so having all these new rights on paper is one thing, but what happens if they're ignored? How do you actually enforce them? That brings us to our fourth section, giving workers a stronger voice and making it easier to get justice. Let's start with workplace safety. When it comes to sexual harassment, the old legal duty said employers had to take reasonable steps to prevent it. That sounds, well, reasonable, but what does it really mean in the real world? Well, the new bill makes a tiny but incredibly powerful change. The duty is now to take all reasonable steps. That one little word shifts the whole focus. It moves from being reactive to being proactive, putting a much, much stronger duty on employers to stop harassment before it starts. And this isn't just a vague idea. It's backed up by specifics. Employers are now on the hook for protecting staff from harassment from third parties, people like customers or clients. New rules will actually spell out what those reasonable steps look like. Plus, victims of sexual harassment will now have official whistleblower protections. And to oversee all of this, a new single enforcement body is being created, the Fair Work Agency. Think of it as a new sheriff in town. It's going to have a whole range of powers, from checking up on minimum wage and holiday pay to tackling serious labor exploitation. It'll even be able to slap companies with penalties and bring cases to a tribunal for workers. And for workers who do need to bring a claim themselves, this is a major practical help. The time limit to go to an employment tribunal is being doubled, from a very, very tight 3 months to a much more manageable 6 months. Finally, let's get down to the brass tacks. You know, whenever there's a change this big, it always brings up 2 key questions. What's it going to cost? And when is it all going to happen? First up, the big money question. The government's own team has looked at what the potential financial hit could be for businesses all across the UK. So, the official number crunchers put the cost of business somewhere between £1 and £5 billion. But, and this is a big but, the government doesn't see this as a loss to the economy. They frame it as a transfer of wealth. Basically, moving money to the lowest paid workers who will benefit from things like better sick pay and guaranteed hours. And this really gets to the heart of their counter-argument. The government's position is that all the benefits, like better productivity and less conflict at work, will be worth billions on their own, and that will ultimately cancel out the direct cost to businesses. So, when does all this become reality? Well, it's not happening overnight. The plan is to hold talks and consultations this year, with the law getting passed sometime between now and 2025. But it's going to take time for businesses to get ready, so the government doesn't expect most of these changes to actually kick in until 2026 at the earliest. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? The whole stated goal here is to make work pay. But after looking at all these proposed changes, will this massive package of reforms truly deliver on that promise for everyone? Well, I guess only time will tell. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.